I am 88 years old now. Nearly a century of life lies behind me, like a long, winding road disappearing into the morning mist. For 42 of those years, I worked as a hospice nurse in rural Pennsylvania, a place of rolling hills, ancient oaks, and quiet valleys where the silence is so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. Over those 4 decades, I have held the hands of more than 1,000 people as they took their very last breath. I have sat in the stillness of 1,000 rooms, watching the light fade from 1,000 pairs of eyes. I learned to recognize the exact, sacred moment it happens. The face suddenly softens, as if an invisible hand has brushed away a lifetime of worry. The tension leaves the jaw, the shoulders drop, and the fierce, desperate fight that may have lasted for weeks or months simply evaporates. I've watched peace arrive like a quiet sunset over a calm lake. Slow, inevitable, and strangely beautiful. But in those same rooms, I have also seen something else arrive. Something far heavier than physical pain. Something that no morphine can dull. It is regret. Not the loud, dramatic kind of regret people talk about at dinner parties while complaining about missed investments, bad real estate deals, or career missteps. It is the deep, silent, icy kind of regret that shows up only when the clock has stopped ticking and there is no more tomorrow left to fix anything. My name is Daniel Harper. I started my nursing career in Pittsburgh in the early 1960s. The city was a different world then, full of soot, clanging steel mills, and a philosophy of medicine that was just as tough and focused on clinical survival. By the early 1970s, I felt a calling that most of my peers found baffling. I transferred into hospice care. My brother thought it was morbid, a waste of a good medical mind. My friends didn't understand why I would choose to spend my days in the waiting room of death. They only saw the end, the decay, the sadness. But I wasn't drawn to death. I was drawn to the truth. You see, people don't tell the truth at office parties. They don't tell it during performance reviews or over a picket fence while trying to impress a neighbor. They don't tell it when they are carefully maintaining the facade of a perfect life. They say, "I'm fine," when their souls are drowning. They smile through gritted teeth when they are exhausted. They spend 40 years building reputations and curated identities, brick by heavy brick. But in that final room, when the machines beep softly like a fading heartbeat and the world outside ceases to matter, there is no energy left for pretending. The masks we wear become too heavy to hold up. The ego dissolves. And what comes out in those final hours is the most raw, honest, and beautiful version of a human being you will ever witness. Over more than 1,000 deaths, I started to notice a pattern that changed how I saw every person I passed on the street. It didn't matter if the patient had been a wealthy executive with a fleet of cars or a broken-down laborer who had lost everything. It didn't matter if they were a local hero or someone the world had long forgotten. In their final hours, not a single one of them, not one, asked to see their bank balance. No one asked to see their stock portfolio. No one asked about their job title or how many people they managed or how much profit they turned in the summer of '82. In over 4 decades, those achievements were mentioned exactly 0 times. Instead, they spoke about people. And more often than not, they spoke about the people they had lost or pushed away. They called out for mothers who had been in the ground for 50 years. I've seen 80-year-old men, giants of industry, cry out "Mom," in a thin, fragile voice that sounded like a 5-year-old lost in a dark forest. They asked about siblings they hadn't spoken to since the Carter administration over some petty inheritance or a forgotten insult. I remember a man named Thomas, a retired colonel. He was a man of iron discipline, a man who had never blinked in the face of danger. But as the shadows lengthened in his room, he didn't talk about his medals. He talked about his younger brother, whom he had called weak 40 years ago and never spoke to again. "He wasn't weak, Daniel," Thomas whispered to me, his eyes wet with a clarity only death can bring. He was kind, and I was too blind to see that kindness is the harder path. He died with a phone in his hand, a number half-dialed that he no longer had the strength to finish. Then there was Eleanor. She stayed with me long after 1987. She was dying of cancer, and her husband sat beside her every single day, a ghost of a man holding her hand and whispering poems. It looked like the perfect love story. But in her final delirium, she kept repeating one name, Clara, over and over like a prayer. Finally, during a brief moment of lucidity, I asked her who Clara was. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to see across time. She was my soul's twin, she said. We stopped speaking when we were 24. We argued over a borrowed dress and a stupid comment. We were both so proud. We thought we had forever to forgive. 40 years of silence followed that one afternoon of pride. At the end, Eleanor didn't care about the house she had decorated or the social clubs she led. She wanted the girl she used to share secrets with on summer porches. That was the first lesson. At the end, people reach for relationships, not trophies. The second thing I noticed is what I call the clearing. It's a mysterious phenomenon. A person who has been confused, drifting, or non-responsive for days suddenly becomes sharp, present, and startlingly clear. It's as if the soul gathers all its remaining light for one final message. And in that clarity, they almost always say the things they held in for a lifetime. I once cared for an 89-year-old father named Walter. He was a classic stoic, a man who thought showing emotion was a sign of a crack in the armor. His son stood at the bedside for days, stiff, awkward, and clearly waiting for something he feared he'd never get. On Walter's final afternoon, the clearing arrived. He motioned his son closer. "I need you to know," Walter whispered, every word a struggle, "that I was proud of you every single day of your life. I just didn't know how to say it without feeling small. I was wrong." The son didn't just cry, he shattered. 89 years of waiting for a sentence that took 5 seconds to say. It wasn't that the love wasn't there. It was that it was withheld out of habit, out of a fear of being vulnerable. I've seen this hundreds of times. Love locked away in a vault because people assume there will always be a tomorrow to open it. But tomorrow is a credit we aren't all guaranteed. The third pattern is what I call the replay, and it's the one that changed my own life the most. Near the very end, people stop talking about milestones. They don't talk about their wedding day as a grand event. They describe the nervous, sweaty feeling in their palms a minute before they walked out. They don't talk about the destination of their most expensive vacation. They talk about the way the light hit the ocean while they ate a sandwich on a plastic chair. A 92-year-old grandmother once spent an hour describing the specific smell of her mother's kitchen on a rainy Sunday in 1940. She talked about the steam on the window panes, the scent of cinnamon, and the sound of a distant radio. She hadn't smiled in weeks, but she beamed as she spoke of that ordinary afternoon. A 76-year-old man talked about catching fireflies with his daughter, describing the damp grass on his bare feet and the jar glowing in the dark. These tiny, unphotographed, unposted moments, the ones we ignore while we're busy chasing success, are the only ones that survive when everything else burns away. After 1,000 deaths, I know this for certain. The things that are consuming your mind right now, the deadlines, the promotions, the arguments about who is right, the desire to be important, will mean absolutely nothing to you in your final hours. They won't even make the highlight reel of your soul. What remains is how you loved, how you felt, the weight of a child asleep on your chest. The first time someone said, "I love you," and you felt a spark in your gut. The sound of rain hitting the roof while you felt safe beside someone who mattered. A hand held under a table. Laughter that came out of nowhere until your sides ached. What keeps me awake some nights is realizing how many people only learn this when it's too late to change their priorities. They spend 40 years building a life they think they're supposed to want, while the life they actually need is happening quietly in the background, neglected. I retired at 74, not because I was tired, but because the urgency of the dying became my own. Every patient was a messenger, and their message was always a variation of the same thing. Don't wait. Don't wait to say the words. Don't wait to call the friend. Don't wait to forgive the brother. Don't wait to sit in the grass and do absolutely nothing but exist. I'm 88 now. I don't know when my own door will close. No, I know this. When it does, I won't be thinking about my career or my legacy. I'll be reaching for the people I loved and the moments that felt like home. I'll be hoping I told the truth while I still had breath. If there is someone you need to speak to, your mother, your child, a friend you lost to pride, do it now. Not when things settle down. Not after the next project. Now, because I have seen the door close right in the middle of a sentence, and once it clicks shut, there are no more chances to finish the thought. If this story moved you, please share in the comments. What is one small moment you realize you've been taking for granted? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe. Let's keep talking about what's real while we still have the time.